Welcome to the Igniting Impact podcast, brought to you by Public Knowledge. I'm Stacey Moss, the host of the podcast and the president of our management consulting firm. Our firm's vision is to be a catalyst for change, leaving each person, project, client, colleague, and community better than when we began. The Igniting Impact podcast is an opportunity to share what our clients and partners do daily to impact the world. We want to highlight this essential work and the work that they do for their customers, clients, and stakeholders that is changing lives despite the many challenges that they face. On today's episode, we have Allison Ward, Terreca DeFehr, Melissa Zielstorf, and Sarah Burns. They are here today to talk about the attending dependency hearing videos out of Washington. And welcome to all of you. I'm so glad that you were able to make it today. Let's start by getting to know each of you just a little bit more. Tell us just a bit about yourself and your background, what you do for work right now, and how you got there. And Allison, if you want to start, that'd be great.
Sure. Thanks, Stacey. Again, my name is Allison Ward. I am a management consultant here at Public Knowledge and our learning practice director. For this project, I was our project manager and got to work with Sarah and her team on these videos. I have worked in child welfare for almost 20 years in lots of different settings and different roles, and am just really excited to be able to talk about this amazing project that we got to do with the state of Washington.
Great. Thank you so much. Sarah, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you, Stacey. Sarah Burns. I do dependency court improvement work at Washington's Administrative Office of the Court. I came to that work. I started initially with AmeriCorps and long ago working to mentor middle school students in the Coachella Valley in California. That was kind of my first introduction to equity, even though I came from meager backgrounds. The school that I worked at in Coachella Valley, the kids didn't have enough desks, we didn't have enough books, the PE program was non-existent, which was really strange considering 10 miles away in Palm Springs and Palm Desert was a very different experience for kids in school. So that kind of led me into social work and starting with Early Head Start. Got to be a social worker. It was an amazing program, a great experience. I spent 4 of those years on special projects, partnering with Washington State University, where we gathered ACE scores for parents and their caregivers and their preschool-age children, and really got to learn about trauma-informed practices and trauma-informed organizations. And when that grant ended, I started doing court improvement work in Spokane, Washington, and got to continue to utilize those skills, and now getting to use them statewide, doing court improvement work for the state of Washington.
Great, thanks and welcome. Teresa, do you want to go next?
Hi, thank you. My name's Terreca DeFehr, and I came into this through the dependency process in 2005. My 2 youngest children were removed from my home, and so I went into the dependency process. I navigated the child welfare system for 2 years. In 2007, I reunified, and at that same day I found out I was going to reunify, I was also asked to share my story. And so I am a founding Washington State parent with lived experience. I've been doing the work since 2007. I took a 5-year break and was also in California and was a registered substance abuse counselor for a while. When I returned to the work, I've been doing advocacy and some other things for systems change. And today, professionally, I do early supports for infants and toddlers with Kindergarten's Cherish program that specializes with families involved with child welfare, that focuses on the social and emotional importance of relationship, that centers around the child and supporting parents as an instrumental part of the dependency list.
Great, thank you. And thanks so much for sharing your story with us today. We really appreciate it. Melissa, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Stacey. My name is Melissa Zielstorf. I am also a parent who navigated the child welfare system I've had two dependencies. The last one was dismissed in 2013. Since then, I became a peer support specialist, got introduced into a family treatment program in Spokane, Washington, and that jump-started my career. Today, I wear a few different hats. I am contracted with the Office of Public Defense as a social service worker. I am also a referral coordinator for a family treatment program in Spokane. And then I also am contracted with AOC, the Administrative Office of Courts, co-designing their equity and engagement framework.
Great. Thank you and welcome, Melissa. I loved so many of your stories, Sarah and Melissa. I actually started my career in AmeriCorps as well, so I love that. It's a great program for getting exposure quickly to the world around us and what it's built on.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right, well, let's get to know you all on a more personal level. If you don't mind telling us who you are outside of work and what values you live by. And let's go in that same order. So, Allison, if you don't mind going first, that'd be great.
No, not at all. Thanks, Stacey. Outside of work, I am somebody who loves to travel and be outside and be active. I always say everyone around me benefits when I work out. I'm much more fun to be around. So if I can get outside or get some exercise in, I'm a much happier person. And even more if I can get on a plane and travel somewhere. The values I live by, I think like honesty, trust, loyalty are the big ones that jump to mind when we have this conversation. So I would say those would be my top three.
Great. Thanks. Sarah?
When Allison shared hers, it's just a reminder of why we connect so well, because I also definitely need that activity and outdoor time. But like I mentioned earlier, I came from meager beginnings and I had very young parents, and they were really good parents. And despite being very poor, we played a lot and we worked hard. And so I think those are a couple of values that really have stayed with me, and that, just good, simple fun, getting outside, biking, running, swimming, all of those things that nature provides. And then I think that hard work and courage was a big piece of it. My parents really instilled in us that despite our meager, being in poverty, that we could achieve whatever we wanted to achieve if we worked hard enough and were persistent. And then I think some of the values that have come from parenting and from working in child welfare and other family serving organizations, just really, I had a son on the autism spectrum, and I think there was a time in my life where I was doing a lot of work in trauma and helping my son navigate systems for his education, and really just burned out. And so from that experience, really found the value of taking care of myself and taking care of others and well-being, all that work around secondary trauma. And then the second part of that is the equality piece, just attempting to help my son navigate his education and realizing that his experience with the school system was wildly different than the experience I had. And then being able to see that in all these other complex systems that we all navigate, but all of us have a different level of, it's a different experience for everybody, their ability to navigate those systems.
Yeah, and that experience, I think, is why, lived experience is so important in the work that we do, Sarah. And so I love that you see that both professionally and personally. It's a great view.
I would say that it's being I'm a mother and grandmother. I'm a mother of three and I'm a grandmother of three. And one of my grandchildren lives with me half the time. And so it's just that really is my joy. And then I do travel quite a bit and spend a lot of time with family and friends. I like to make sure that I'm learning or living in inner peace and whatever process that is. And I think that has a lot to do with my core values. My values are gratitude and compassion and flexibility. Life brings lessons, and when you can be flexible and have some passion and yourself in gratitude, you can grow through them and not have them define you. And I just think really that's, I learned that through entering in child welfare, and I continue to just live in that and face the adversities.
Thank you for sharing. I love the line through all of you so far around self-care and peace and mindfulness. It's a great reminder. All right, Melissa.
Yeah, so my joy comes from my children first and foremost. I love nature. I am a gardener, a hobby gardener. So I am either it's houseplants or outdoor plants or flowers. And then I also paddleboard. One day I'll get a wetsuit or a dry suit and paddleboard in the colder months. But yeah, that's me personally. And then my values are, I think, courage, vulnerability, and then equity and empathy within work and personally.
Great. Thank you, Melissa. It's so nice to get a glimpse into each of your lives, both work and personal. So thanks so much for sharing that with us today. Let's just talk a bit now about the project that we're here to talk about. And Sarah, maybe if you could help us, just give us an overview of the project and what the problem was that it was trying to solve.
Sure, Stacey. As I mentioned earlier, I started working for Washington Administrative Office of the Courts doing court improvement work during COVID. And half of my time was spent on what we called COVID Recovery Project. And during COVID, we received some federal funding to reach out to our courts to learn what's working and what's not working. Now that we were in that place where some courts were doing hearings hybrid, some courts were only doing in person still. Some courts were still using telephone only. We're a non-unified court system. And so for our 39 courts, each court gets to kind of determine how they operate. And so they were all doing something different. And we wanted to reach out to learn, what's working, what's not working, talk to them about backlogs and other issues they might be facing during COVID. And overwhelmingly, partners identified the struggle that in the virtual hearings for families to know what to do during those hearings. Those common problems we've heard about, muting and unmuting when they're supposed to, things that are in their background that shouldn't be in their background when they're attending court, all the things that can happen when you're trying to Zoom or you use WebEx from your home to attend a professional setting in a virtual space. And so we had over 200 dependency partners take part in those interviews. And so we had just a ton of information telling us that that would be a valuable use of that federal funding to find a way to help families be more successful when they're attending their court hearings. And I have to say, initially, we thought about this as a virtual or hybrid solution, but ultimately we landed on really there's value in families having information whether they're attending in person, virtually, or hybrid. And so our videos serve all three purposes, ways to attend. And then we decided that there were kind of two buckets. There was the bucket for folks who really just needed that IT support, the ability to connect to their hearing and where do you find the mute button? How do you turn your video on and off? Those types of questions. And then more the practical ways to be successful at your court hearing. And so really the problem we were trying to solve really is just increased access to dependency hearings, families being more successful when they do attend dependency hearings, and then also those dependency hearings moving smoothly and happening timely because families are better prepared for their hearings.
That's great. That's really helpful. Allison, can you tell us just a bit about Public Knowledge's support on the project?
Absolutely. So we started this conversation kind of where Sarah had left off, that they had this issue that they were trying to solve and did we have a solution to meet their needs? And so within our learning services, we had a conversation with Sarah and other folks at the AOC about how to meet this need. And what we landed on was creating these 2 short videos to meet the needs that Sarah just mentioned. So meeting the IT needs and kind of walking through, here's how you join a Zoom call, here's how you join a WebEx meeting, and here's where all the controls are. And we designed that for people to use right before their hearing. So, 20 minutes before they're in court, they can watch this and get reoriented to the technology and have those questions answered. Like Sarah mentioned, how do I mute myself? How do I unmute myself? And then also create another video of what to expect. And like Sarah said, whether you're in person walking into a courthouse, whether you're calling in, or whether you're on Zoom or WebEx, what can I expect and what is my role? How do I participate? So we set up a process to create these 2 videos to meet both of those needs for their families and stakeholders.
Great, thanks. Could you guys share who all is involved in the project, kind of who's on the team and what their roles were on the work?
Yeah, I could share from our side of things. Actually, one of my favorite stories of this work is, we typically try to include partners. In each category will include some judicial officers, parent attorneys, youth attorneys, make sure that we have CASA and GAL represented in our work groups. And really, in the last few years, have been intentional about including lived experts. So I reached out to some of the participants from the COVID recovery study, really focusing on those professionals that seem to really understand the technical challenges and the barriers that families are facing. Also to courts that have been really innovative in their approach to engaging families in the virtual and hybrid, to pull together a work group. And I had worked with Melissa and Tressa previously, and so I asked them to take part in this work. And the first work group meeting, we were doing our brainstorming work and talking about, what are those things that we want families to know when they're attending virtually or hybrid hearings. And the list was probably like 25 or 30 deep about all the things that parents shouldn't do, the ways that, they're cursing, they're chewing gum, they're using the wrong link, all these different ways that they're all the things that we should put in our resource that for them not to do. And I think it was Melissa, and she's done this a couple times in meetings, and I'm always just in awe of her bravery and courage because, it's hard sometimes to speak up, especially when there's judicial officers and attorneys in the room. And she, after there was a quiet pause, she unmuted and she said, if you make that video, I would never watch it. So she said, if you put all those things in there that parents can't do, I would never watch it, and no parent would ever want to watch it. And so we actually, Tressa, Melissa, and I met outside of that larger work group to draft a parent-friendly, a family-friendly storyboard to bring back to the group. And I don't know, Tressa and Melissa, if you have anything else to add about how that team changed or was developed.
I think from my standpoint, it's just a matter of, making sure somebody with lived experience has input. Parents who are navigating child welfare, almost every day they're being told what they need to do in order to, quote unquote, be good enough to get their children home, right? And so I didn't want to see this as just another thing that they have to do. It's all about support, right? And so maybe it's not just parents who need to see these videos. I mean, it could be other community professionals as well, who just don't know. What you don't know, you don't know. And instead of, just trying to change behavior or making it into a negative for parents, it's just all about supporting parents.
It sounds like what you did, Melissa, was flip the narrative from talking about all the things that they're doing wrong to being a lot more strengths-based about it. about educating and supporting your way through this and how to navigate those hearings.
Yes, exactly. Strength-based.
That's such an important piece too. And I do think you're exactly right. Such an important piece for families and kids in the dependency world, right? Because everyone's telling them what not to do, what how to behave, what to stop doing. And so anytime that we can be more strengths-based and focused on preparing and supporting, I think is such an important piece. So,
yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and then just to add a little bit to everything that Sarah Moss already said, I think one of the things that's commonly done is like the professionals, child welfare professionals, make resources that are relatable to them.
Yeah, they're focused on the professionals, right? Not on the families, which is the whole point of the system. So I love that.
Stacey, if I could jump in, it was so evident from the first conversation we had about these videos that we needed to use language that was supportive and family friendly and trauma informed, because it is really easy to go to those like, okay, here's how you join a hearing, here's the information, but how do we do that in a supportive way that's going to actually engage people? Like Melissa said, I'm not watching that video. Like, how do we get this to a place where it's interesting, it's engaging, and it's short, like respecting people's time? And all of that was so apparent from the very beginning. In the first conversation we had with Sarah and the rest of the Washington team, I think we had 20 or 30 people on that call saying, make sure you include this, use this kind of language, like be strengths-based. And it was so exciting and such a positive experience from the very beginning that that's the lens that this team was coming to create these videos for their families.
It's so excited, but it's also so important, right? Because you guys are talking about key pieces of adult learning theory, where you want to make sure that it's respectful of time, that it's engaging, that people want to watch it. And also a really big piece of it is the time that people can spend on it, right? It's a little like the most important and a little as possible so that you're not teaching and training on everything forever. So I love that it's focused on both, Allison.
Yeah, it was like we had kind of time constraints from the beginning and tried really hard to keep these to 3 to 5 minutes just so they were really a quick reference that people could come back to. And we had a lot of conversations about the look and feel, like what was going to feel most appropriate and relatable to folks watching the videos. So it was a really powerful conversation from the very beginning.
That's great. Okay, well, let's turn now to impact. One of our core values at PK is impact, and actually we've created this whole podcast around it because I really do believe that it's essential to our work, right? And allows us to kind of drive progress across time. And so for us, impact means that we're approaching everything with our energy focused on identifying the right goals, outcomes, and strategies. And additionally, that we each have a personal responsibility to make a positive impact on our projects, on our world, on our teammates, and everything that we come in contact with. So if you look just at the next layer down, a little deeper at this project, what impact do you all hope to have and on whom?
I could start off, Stacey. So I know for me, coming from the court improvement perspective, I think I mentioned earlier, we have 39 courts. We're not a unified court system. Each court can kind of adapt for their community. While that has a lot of benefits, some of the drawbacks include, varying processes, right? So each court might have rules for how families can attend court, and court to court it's going to be different, and where they keep those and how they share those rules are in different spaces, and the level of support each court offers their community is going to be different. And so for us, it was a way to create a statewide approach, for having some consistent practice around supporting families attending their court hearings and making those hearings available to families. And then the second part of that, I think, is, by nature, families in dependency court and the professionals in dependency court, we're a reactive system. There's a lot of crises happening. So by nature, we have a lot going on, and bandwidth for complex systems, and it's low. So making it easier for families and professionals, because I think, a professional coming into this system, learning, what is good practice for attending court hearings. So having some consistency around that and making it accessible for folks coming into work, to a hearing that, if they haven't had experience in the court system before. And I think the other piece of that is we are serving a population, not only are they stressed, but high levels of disability, including substance use, mental health. We have folks from different cultures who speak different languages. There's so many varying ways that families are coming to us. And so the better we can adapt and create a process to help them be successful in our system, I think that's procedural justice. It's making systems more accessible by providing folks some simple tools to access complex systems. And hopefully they'll be more likely to achieve their potential with their case.
Yeah, it really is tied into those outcomes. I love that.
Yeah, I agree with trying to keep things consistent. And I often think of, parents or others parents that I'm working with who might have developmental disabilities or limited English proficiency. And these hearings are in 5 different languages. And so that can be super helpful for parents with disabilities or language proficiencies.
Oh, that's so great to hear that so we have them in multiple languages so that we're reducing that language barrier, as well as kind of teaching about those hearings and how to be there. That's great. Anything else on impact of the project?
Yeah, I think it's multifaceted a little bit for me too. It's that we're modeling parents with lived experience as valued professionals when it comes to partnering and co-designing to support parents and families entering into the child welfare dependency court system, and demonstrating that the unique skill set that we have through actually going through the process, and just the different things that we've learned. When we hear one message several ways, it eventually makes sense. Like we start picking up little things at a time, which then helps us during the experience, start learning how to show up and be our own advocate and things like that.
That's so important because I think, we have also worked internally in public knowledge over the last 4 years to increase the number of people that we have on our teams with lived expertise, experience. And it's actually interesting because you guys brought up what we've talked about it in a couple of different ways and why it's important. And earlier you talked about how it influenced your decisions, right? And made you make better decisions about the project and the work so that you make a better impact with who you want to impact. And then the one that you just mentioned is about modeling, right? And I think it's all of this for us too. It's both. We know that if we have people on our teams with lived expertise, that they're going to do better work, that we're going to be doing better work because of it. But it's also for us a way of modeling how to do that with our clients as well, because everyone values that at different levels. And I think as we interact, it's a way of modeling that. So I love that you guys are doing it for both reasons. Okay, let's talk just a little bit more about impact personally. I'm curious, I gave you our definition of impact, but I'm curious what impact means to you each personally and what kind of impact that you hope to have on this world. And whoever wants to go first is welcome.
I think for me, once I listened to a couple of your podcasts before today, and I've kind of been going down a rabbit hole on impact. That has not necessarily been in my vocabulary until recently. And I just, number one, love the word. And, you mentioned leaving somebody or something better off than what it began, right? And that's really what it's all about for me in my work. As a parent who has gone through the child welfare system twice, the only impact that I want to do is just support, advocate, and help other parents who are currently going through the system. And I with full compassion and empathy. And so I hope that's the impact that I bring every day to the clients that I have the privilege of serving.
So strengthening their ability to navigate the system successfully and doing that with that compassion.
Yeah. And I would, sometimes I think successfully is, not every case is going to end successfully, but as long as that parent can advocate and give the good fight to the best of their knowledge or to the best of their ability, it doesn't always end successfully, but just giving them a voice, making sure their voice is heard. And yeah.
Thank you, Melissa. Who wants to go next? What does impact mean to you, and what impact do you hope to have?
I can go, Stacey. Melissa, as you were talking, I was just thinking about like the power of making a difference for one person. And I started my career in child welfare running a group home. And so I was working with adjudicated delinquent adolescent boys and their families. And it was the hardest job I'll ever have. And I absolutely loved it. And I think about going home every day. I thought, like, did I do something right for one of these kids? And like looking for those successes every day, however small they might have been. And over the 5 years that I did that, I started to get better and better at finding those successes, even on the hardest days. And I've probably told this story to some of you, but I remember there was a young man at the group home who had left, had gone home, and had gotten in some trouble and had a court hearing and was actually held in jail overnight. And when he was released, he called his mom and said, "I'm going to the group home. Allison will know what to do." And I think about that now when I'm having a bad day and think like, I made a difference that day for that kid. And some days that's absolutely enough to know that I was able to make an impact and let that young man and his family know that I saw them and I heard them and I was there to do whatever I could to help.
My guess is that's past more than one person, though, at some point. I should pass that on.
It's related a little bit to my experience as a mom and a kiddo on the spectrum. And like, I was mentioning his experience in school and how he had all these barriers, for traditional education put up for him. And I think similarly with lived experts, I've been fortunate since 2016 to have been able to partner with lived experts pretty closely. And it's similar, right? Like, just remove the barriers and support them, and they're going to reach their potential. My son got through school somehow. But he started working at 14. He's had the same job for 6 years. He's now in a leadership position and he's flourishing. And I see the same thing with the lived experts that we partner with. Just get rid of the barriers, provide them the support that they need and ask for, and they'll flourish. And I think it's the same for the families we serve. Like, let's remove some of these barriers so people can reach their potential. And it's just such a complex system. It's like trying to buy a house without a mortgage person to walk you through it sometimes. Yeah. So it's just this really complex process. And we have 39 courts doing it 39 different ways, and complex, the department system is complex. And so, for a reason, right? Child safety is really important, but, how do we look to see how we can remove these barriers so folks can be more successful in this system?
Yeah, it is a very complex system, but I love your point. It's well taken that at the heart of it, right? The whole purpose why we're there is very simple, and a very simple one. And I love how you shared it about, removing barriers and supporting. I think that that's how you do make an impact, right? In any area, but especially in a complex system.
For me, impact means learning to live in your imperfection and being able to do that personally. I am also able to show up and talk about that professionally. Personally, learning that when I started unlearn rigidity and perfectionism, I was able to improve my health, accomplish education, my comprehension. I just started to see benefits from living in imperfection. And then, professionally, what I'm beginning to really learn is just really how you can, talk about like showing up in your imperfections and going from a fixed to a growth mindset. We're also, then talking about stigma and biases and changing the narrative between things needing to be perfect for the parents and everything's supposed to look a certain way. This is an imperfect process. And so that's what impact is.
Oh, I love that. We spend a lot of time talking about being vulnerable and being able to talk about your strengths and your weaknesses. So I love that perfectionism lens that you added. And then I will never actually ever forget early on in my career as a child welfare attorney talking to and training other attorneys on the goal is not for every family and home to look like yours, right? And I think that is such a hard thing to learn and train on. But those biases that we come to the table with, they're every day as professionals in the system for sure. Well, thank you all for sharing. I always love that question, and I love hearing how people think about impact and how they think about what they want to leave in this world. Thank you for sharing with us. On our podcast this year, our theme is generating and using evidence to drive that impact or to drive change. So we talked about the impact that you want to have with this project, but let's turn now to a bit about the evidence that you're generating and using to show success. So my first question is really, are you, I know you talked about some of the data that you collected at the beginning of this project, kind of getting input, but would you tell us a little bit more about that evidence or data that either already existed or that you were able to generate on your own as the basis for this project?
Yeah, we really didn't have data previously other than the COVID recovery interviews that I spoke about. The courts, we capture very little data. I mean, the data that are on the court forms that are really specific to federal requirements for the dependency process. DCYF has some data that they collect, in their systems. But as far as folks attending hearings, whether they attended, whether they were successful, whether they felt like they were heard, those types of data points really aren't captured unless we're doing a special project. And so we really kind of had to lean on the needs, the qualitative reports that we got from the report about what the needs were. And then I think both Melissa and Tressa, I think we've talked a little bit about that. The hard part about that kind of data is that it's skewed, right? What we just talked about, that it includes bias and it includes like the perspective of professionals. So even though we interviewed 200 people to talk about the challenges during court hearings, we didn't talk to 200 court users or court participants. We talked to professionals. And so that was, even though we just had Melissa and Tressa in the sense of only two lived experts in comparison to all of this data that we received from professionals, I was happy that their voices were so strong in the development process. And Stacey, I will tell you, and thank goodness Allison was so patient with us, because it was down to the word. The lived experts will be like, nope, not that word. That's not a kind word. Or the expression on one of the animated person's faces, like, oh, that parent looks miserable in the video. We've got to change his expression. And public knowledge was great, adapting and making changes as we went through the storyboards, word by word, image by image, and change to try to really reflect, a parent's experience.
I love that, though, because that is a type of evidence or data that you were collecting too, right? It's just that feedback on the impact of that language or the impact of that video. It's such an important piece of understanding and making sure that what you're developing is exactly what the listeners need to know or the learners need to know. Okay, great. Well, what kind of data, or are you looking at data on usage of the videos or kind of how they're being used or how often they're being used at this point?
Yeah, the data we're looking at right now is really just web page analytics, and they're pretty limited, unfortunately. So the videos are housed on our webpage, the Family and Youth Justice Programs, and we've moved them around to make them front and center so folks can easily find them. We attached a QR code to flyers. We've developed materials. In fact, some of the materials are available in all of the five languages in addition to English. And we attach QR codes to all of those materials so that families and professionals can use that QR code or the link to easily find the videos. But we're looking at our analytics month to month and, have different implementation strategies that we're working on ongoing to help, get the videos out there, get folks using them. I mentioned that we're a non-unified court system. So it's really, my previous manager said something like, we have more of a carrot than a stick. so it's really about encouraging courts to find the value, the use, helping them understand where these videos can live and how they can be utilized. We just recently made a great connection with the department and their communications department, who are going to partner with us to share out the videos. We've sent packages to each court with some, a starter kit of materials. I think one of the brilliant things that we did is we created a business card for the videos that have a QR code that professionals in the field can just hand a card out to folks. We talked about accessibility. I think the other thing we created that was really great is, we know that families, one of the barriers is, broadband, Wi-Fi, access to the internet, access to a device to access the internet, the ability to watch the videos without buffering. And so we created some additional materials it's just a brochure with some simple instructions so that we have alternative ways for families to access the information.
Oh, that's really great. I love all of that. I love the business card idea too, because that's just such an easy thing to hand out if you're, prepping for court or just leaving for it and you hand it over. That's great. Well, have you gotten any feedback from anyone who's used the videos or used it to prep for hearings? Have you heard anything? What are you hearing so far?
I have a couple of clients who I gave the card to. One has intellectual delay, and so that person reported the videos being helpful. But other than that, that's the only feedback I've heard.
In my experience, interestingly enough, there's been a lot of excitement by lived experts. I presented to the Washington Parent Ally Committee, and there was a lot of feedback of, we're going to use this at our Dependency 101 trainings, which is for incoming parents who are coming into dependency. It's the training that Parent Allies give those families to help them learn about the dependency process and kind of start them off with some success. And so that was really exciting. We also have courts who are using them regularly as a way to inform families about attending their hearings. And so we're also building it into some work we're going to be doing with hybrid and virtual hearings. The National Center for State Courts is they're creating an observation tool for best practices. And part of that is that piece around having consistent instructions available in different languages and different ways to help families connect to virtual and hybrid hearings. And so as we start working with courts around that observation tool, these videos meet a lot of that guidance that they're creating for good practice for virtual and hybrid hearings. So we're really excited to use them ongoing in some of our efforts to inform courts, help create equity and access in these different spaces. And Teresa, I don't know, do you have anything to add as far as feedback?
Yeah, I was also going to add in the role I have now with early support for infants and toddlers, 0 to 3, when you come in, when everyone gets a family resource coordinator or the families, and they're using now the videos to work with parents and caregivers as they go through their evaluation as just like a resource, and they're really excited about it.
That's really great to hear. And it sounds like it's being used in ways that you guys hadn't even anticipated, which is what you want.
And I think the other piece, Stacey, is at AOC, we're also talking about sharing it with other court programs because the videos were created for dependency families or dependency court. But if you watch them, it's really applicable to most other types of court as well. Yeah. And so as part of our implementation plan, we're planning to share this work with other courts and see if they're interested. So we have some ways that we're still working on getting these videos out there and shared with families. And I think with non-unified court systems, it's kind of a slow process because it's a lot. You can build a product, but what I'm learning is implementation, and ongoing implementation is as important as the build of the initial resource. And so we're really building out that implementation plan and executing it and trying to build that interest and motivation to use these videos.
Yeah, that implementation and communication is so important and is likely, more important at this phase in the project. That's also a good lesson learned, I think, too, Sarah, which takes me to our next question, which is, are there any lessons learned so far that you can share with our listeners who might want to do a project similar to yours or that you'll be taking forward into your next project?
Mine's absolutely that piece we just talked about. With this project, we had limited time because of the funding requirements, but absolutely doing some work ahead of time to get buy-in, to start talking about the development of the videos, starting to share out information about them in advance, making those connections with partners to start, sharing materials and encouraging use, and then just ongoing ways that we can keep the videos, at the front minds of professionals who are working, like I said, in a very reactive system. Everybody's overburdened. And so really finding ways to make this part of their practice, finding ways for them to see the value in sharing out those business cards and encouraging families to use a QR code or the link, having the videos displayed in their lobbies, all of the ways that courts and our court partners can utilize the videos to help families and others who are attending court be more successful.
Allison, Teresa, or Melissa, any lessons learned that you'd want to share?
I just echo what Sarah said. I think our first step in this project was done really quickly because of the funding. And I think it would have been great if we had had more time. Luckily, we've gotten to add on to this project many times and gotten to work with this team over and over again to keep kind of adding pieces like the implementation plan, the translations. So we've gotten to spend more time and be like really mindful and thoughtful about where we wanted to go next, and are having conversations about possible next steps. So I think that's the biggest one that jumps to mind. So I completely agree with you, Sarah.
And I would just add having more people at the table with lived experience, I think that diverse setting is where really great perspectives come in.
Yeah, I love that. And I love your point, Sarah, that, you weren't able to or didn't kind of had that interview with 200 parents or families in the system, but it would be great to think about what that might look like for a future one too. So, okay, well, before we wrap up and get to our fun ending on the podcast, is there anything else that you guys would like to share with the listeners? It's okay if there isn't, but if there is, I'm going to give you a chance to share that before we close.
I think I just, would, again, speak to what Melissa and Tressa have shared, and the fact of, the last 2 years in a different project, I've been working with a team of lived experts to co-design a framework to partner with lived experts to do systems change work. And it really changes the field as far as when we're partnering with lived experts and we're doing it well, that it can change a project from something that families, aren't going to find useful, valuable, to, really that inclusivity, accessible, all of those pieces that we talk about wanting for our system. And in addition to the pieces around race equity, right? So when we think about culture and, we often don't speak the language that our families speak. We don't use the terminology. We use court terminology. We use court language. And really that's not the language our families understand. And so the more we can partner with lived experts, pay for their participation, like I said earlier, remove the barriers and support them. In Washington State, we have handfuls of, besides Melissa and Teresa, handfuls of examples of lived experts who have gone on to work in legislation and do all these wonderful changes to our child welfare system. And so, these videos are just one example of many. So I think that's where I would want to wrap up with is anybody, whether you're thinking of doing a project, with videos or any other type of child welfare project, to really think about not only partnering with lived experts, but partnering well, supporting them and elevating their perspectives to inform your projects. I think that's the path to creating a more just system.
Yeah, and I would add, the one thing I deeply appreciate about these videos is the fact that it's a video. I'm somebody who really struggles with reading, and having a short video that gives you instructions or guides you through a court hearing, I feel like it's super valuable. I remember when I was going through my dependency, and I see this to this day. Sometimes, it's, okay, your children were removed. So now you go to this courthouse at this time and you just show up, and you are in the midst of trauma and you have no idea what you're doing. You only know that your children were removed. And I wasn't educated on the dependency process, what each court hearing was, etc. And so, I like how, Sarah had made a good point about, accessibility. And I think that's what these videos do. Yeah, I think they're just super helpful.
Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, just to what Sarah and Melissa said, parents and sometimes caregivers are the most uninformed and uneducated on the system. And so as soon as the child welfare system enters into your life, it's a power differential. And there is a different language, like with the word safe or voluntary. You have two different meanings between the parents and the department and the professionals. These videos was one of my favorite projects that I've worked on because it was a way to inform and educate the parents on how to show up, and the impact that not educating parents on the process that they're about to experience can cause generational harm or generational narrative change. And so we just need to do better for the families that are impacted by the child welfare system and educational.
I love that's how we're leaving it, is that we just need to do better for families. And I think that's true everywhere and on so many different levels. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, so to close out every podcast, we're actually just going to have a little bit of fun. So this is lighthearted, not meant to be hard, but we want to ask our guests to share some of their wisdom and advice. So I told you earlier that we built this podcast around one of our 3 core values, impact. But to close out, I'm hoping that you'll share your thoughts with us on our other 2 core values. And again, no pressure, it's just whatever comes to mind for you first. All right, let's go. And Allison, I'm going to pick on you and make you go first, since you know what our other 2 values are. And then if we want to, we'll just go Allison, Melissa, Teresa, and then Sarah. So the first question is just, what is your best advice for achieving high levels of inclusion in the workplace?
I think for me, inclusion really focuses on hearing everyone's voice and giving everyone an opportunity to share their experience, to share their voice, and being able to support people who aren't the loudest voice in the room, and being able to kind of seek out those opinions and experiences and perspectives from people who are part of a project or part of a team, a part of an organization, and just making sure that you are doing everything in your power to make people feel seen and heard.
Thank you. Melissa, what is your advice for achieving high levels of inclusion in the workplace?
Yeah, I echo what Allison said first. I think when we build relationships or rapport, that's where the opportunities come from. And that's part of inclusion, including every voice. Every voice needs to be heard and every voice should be valuable. And I echo again what Allison said.
Thank you. Teresa.
My best advice for achieving high levels of inclusion is also recruiting those that you don't know. It's important to always be reaching out and recruiting and learning from various perspectives. Important to build relationships and to have relationships with your team members. I also believe it's important to always be recruiting and inviting new experiences. So there's like a new perspective and experiencing the changes that are being made at the systems level. And yeah, just really keeping that door open and flowing for recruitment and new perspectives.
Great. Sarah.
Yeah, I'm going to share one that I learned from partnering. I mentioned the project we're in co-designing with experts and constantly learning from them. But probably the biggest piece that I've taken away is the importance of authenticity in these spaces. Just showing up as you are, not having to always be in that professional. We used to be taught that you had to show up a certain way professionally, no matter what was happening in your life, no matter how you were feeling that day. So being able to show up, and if you're feeling broken, just, being okay with having your camera off, or if you cry during a meeting, that's okay. Because that really creates a space for everyone to show up and be a little imperfect. And, it helps people know that it's safe to show up as yourself.
I love that for so many reasons. I like all of your ideas. So thank you. Thank you all for sharing that. I do think that you hit on some of the most important pieces of that inclusion and authenticity. Okay, the last one is just, what is your best advice for achieving high levels of teamwork in the workplace? And I know we've talked about teamwork actually a lot today. But just wondering kind of what your key tips are or best advice that you might give our listeners. And let's just go in the same order. So Allison, if you don't mind going again first.
I think it builds on what I said about inclusion, like including every voice and making sure that everyone has a seat at the table and has a part of the team. So everyone has a role and a responsibility in the team. But I think, honestly, when I think about putting teams together, a couple of the biggest things I think about are having a shared experience, a shared goal to work towards, and making sure that each member in the team is invested in that in their own way. And then ultimately, I have to have fun with my teams, and I want people on my teams to find the fun in the work. So whether that's doing icebreakers or having, conversations like we did at the beginning of this podcast that kind of is about our personal life, just ways to get to know each other and be able to have fun together while we're doing some really hard and really important work.
Yeah. Melissa.
Yeah. And again, I'll echo off of what Allison said. With teamwork, I would add, well, Allison already said it, but sharing that power, vulnerability. I think that is, we need to come in as our whole selves and be comfortable. Well, not necessarily comfortable, but be our whole selves. I agree with celebrations. We need to celebrate as a team. And I think most importantly, we need to be taking care of ourselves. We are in our jobs, there's secondary trauma, we're burned out, we, all of the things. And if we are not taking care of ourselves, then everything else just, it trickles down to everyone else that we're serving or working with. And I was just reading something online the other day, and it said, build practices that support your own healing and well-being. And that really resonates with me. We have to be taking care of ourselves in order to have that teamwork, right?
That is such a great definition for self-care. I love that because it does kind of make it broader, right? Not just that, but like, what are those practices that we can put into our daily lives that help us, and think about also what can hinder us.
Yeah. And then the communication is not transactional, right? It's transformative. And that's what we need to be having with everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, Melissa. Teresa, what about you? What's your best advice for teamwork in the workplace?
Yeah. The past 3 years, I've been facilitating the Washington State Ally Committee, and, being able to lead a team and helping recruit and grow it. I learned that my best advice would be become a student of your team members, and learn that when there's a lack of communication or involvement, it's probably because not all the members are on the same page, and so it's okay to pause and reflect. And one of the things that we're doing recently do that is a team building activity, and celebrating the growth and all the work that's been put into everything, and really pausing and going to have some fun with all the work everybody's doing, and also doing some trivia questions and stuff like that to help get everyone on the same page in the growth. And so I really, just becoming a student of your team, and then knowing that we're only as strong as the member that is formed or involved.
No, thank you.
I had to write that down when Trust was because I thought it was so good.
It is.
So true, though. Yeah. I work in the court system, so it's really hard for me not to choose, sharing the power. It's very hierarchical. And I think as a judicial officer or a person in leadership, people are looking to you to lead. And so sharing the power it can be sometimes difficult to see how to do that. But these videos are a prime example of when you share the power well, that your end product can be so much better. Because if I had, like I said, let the professionals choose this project, it would have been a list of things that families shouldn't do in a court hearing. And so, finding ways to, let somebody else lead the meeting, have somebody else present, share in the decision making, really highlight somebody else's skills, because we all bring something to the table and it's usually different. And so really finding those ways to put everybody on that even keel, even though we might have a different position in the organization. I think that really encourages teamwork and also creates a really fantastic end product.
You are correct. That's a hard thing to do in the court system and with lawyers and justice. So I love that you guys are finding ways to do that in different pockets. Well, I cannot thank you all enough for your time today. It's been a real privilege to be here with you today, to connect, to learn, to grow, to breathe, and to share. Until next time.